The holy water sizzled against the ancient stone circle like acid on flesh. Karen's eyes rolled back, revealing only whites as she chanted in a language that predated Christianity by millennia. Behind her, the HOA meeting minutes scattered in. An impossible wind, and Maya realized with bone-deep terror that her neighbor hadn't come to cleanse her backyard. She'd come to claim something that was never meant to be awakened. The symbols carved into Maya's grandmother's meditation stones began to glow, and Karen's voice dropped to an inhuman register. This sacred ground belongs to the Lord now. Maya Chen pressed her face against the kitchen window, watching her new neighbor drag a white plastic bucket across the property line into her backyard. The woman moved with the determined stride of someone on a divine mission, her sensible khakis and Blessed Mom t-shirt incongruous against the pre-dawn darkness. What the hell? Maya muttered, grabbing her robe. She'd bought the Victorian house 6 months ago specifically for its privacy. 2 acres of woods, a creek, and most importantly, the stone circle her grandmother had installed decades ago for meditation and healing ceremonies. The realtor had called it quirky landscaping. Maya knew better. The motion sensor lights flickered on as she stepped onto the back deck. The woman, blonde bob, determined jaw, crucifix pendant catching the light, was already at the stone circle, pulling bottles from her bucket. "Excuse me," Maya called out, her breath visible in the October air. "You're on my property." The woman looked up with the serene smile of the righteously unhinged. "Good morning. I'm Karen Whitmore from 42 Maple Drive. I'm here to help." "Help? With what, exactly?" Maya descended the deck steps, noting how Karen had positioned herself directly in the center of the 7-stone circle. The stones were each taller than a person, weathered granite carved with symbols Maya's grandmother had never fully explained. "This." Karen gestured expansively at the circle. "I've been praying about it since you moved in. The Lord revealed to me that this is a place of darkness. Pagan symbols, negative energy, it's affecting the whole neighborhood." Maya felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came with confronting willful ignorance. "Those aren't pagan symbols. They're from my grandmother's meditation practice. Buddhist and Taoist traditions, same difference." Karen unscrewed the cap on a gallon jug of water. "It's not Christian, which means it's not of God. I'm here to cleanse this space and dedicate it properly." "You're here to what now?" Maya's voice climbed an octave. "Lady, I don't know what kind of neighborhood you think this is, but you can't just walk onto someone's property and start your own personal exorcism." Karen's smile never wavered. "Actually, I can. I checked with the city. Religious expression is protected, and since this affects the spiritual welfare of our community, I have every right to be here." Maya pulled out her phone. "Let me call the police and see what they think about. Go ahead." Karen began pouring water in a deliberate circle around the largest stone. "Officer Bradley attends my church. So does City Councilman Peters. They understand the importance of keeping our community spiritually clean." The casual confidence in Karen's voice sent ice through Maya's veins. She'd moved here from San Francisco specifically to escape this kind of small-town bullshit, but apparently it had found her anyway. "Listen," Maya tried again, forcing calm into her voice. "I understand you have religious beliefs, but these stones have sentimental value. My grandmother, your grandmother was deceived by false spirits." Karen pulled out a second bottle, this one smaller, with a cork stopper. "But it's never too late for redemption. That's why I brought blessed oil from Jerusalem. Once I cleanse this space and dedicate it to Christ, you'll feel the difference immediately." Maya watched in growing horror as Karen began drizzling oil over the carved symbols. The liquid seemed to smoke where it touched the stone, though that had to be the cold air. Had to be. "Stop." Maya stepped into the circle. "Right now. Get off my property." "I can't do that." Karen's voice had taken on a dreamy quality, her eyes slightly unfocused. "He's calling me to finish this. The stones are fighting back, but his will is stronger." The stones aren't fighting anything. They're rocks. But even as Maya said it, she felt something shift in the air. A heaviness, like the moment before a thunderstorm. The carved symbols seemed deeper somehow, casting shadows that shouldn't exist under the harsh security lights. Karen began to chant, her voice rising and falling in what sounded like Latin. Or what she thought was Latin. Maya caught fragments, sanctificare, purificare, in nomine patris, but the pronunciation was so mangled it might as well have been gibberish. Karen, stop. Maya reached for the woman's arm, but Karen spun away with surprising agility. Don't touch me. I'm protected by the blood of the Lamb. Karen's eyes were wide now, pupils dilated. She fumbled for another bottle, a small vial of clear liquid. Holy water from Lourdes. This will burn away any lingering darkness. She appended the vial over the central stone, the one with the most elaborate carvings. The water hit the symbols and began to steam, not the gentle vapor of cold liquid on cold stone, but actual steam, rising in deliberate spirals. Maya stepped back, her grandmother's warnings echoing in her memory. The stones. Remember, little one. They hold the balance. Never let anyone disturb them without understanding what they're disturbing. What did you just do? Maya whispered. Karen laughed, a sound like breaking glass. I'm setting things right. This whole area has been corrupted for too long. But don't worry, once I'm done, your property values will skyrocket. Everyone wants to live in a blessed neighborhood. The steam rising from the stones had formed shapes now, geometric patterns that folded in on themselves, impossible angles that hurt to look at directly. The temperature was dropping, and Maya could hear something, like singing coming from underground. Karen, we need to leave. Now. Absolutely not. Karen pulled out a larger container of holy water, this one in a plastic milk jug labeled St. Bartholomew's Parish, blessed by Father McKinnon. I'm just getting started. By sunrise, this will be consecrated ground. She began pouring the water in a wider circle, her chanting growing louder. But the words were changing, evolving into something that definitely wasn't Latin. The symbols on the stones pulsed with a light that seemed to come from within the granite itself. Maya's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The circle is waking up. You need to stop her before she finishes the ritual. With shaking hands, Maya typed back, Who is this? Your grandmother's friend. The one who helped her place the stones. Karen doesn't know what she's doing, but something else is guiding her. Something that's been waiting for exactly this kind of interference. Maya looked up. Karen was now completely absorbed in her ritual, pouring holy water and oil, in increasingly complex patterns. The ground within the stone circle had begun to glow with a soft, phosphorescent light. How do I stop her? You don't. You prepare for what's coming. The stones weren't just meditation aids, Maya. They were a containment system. And she's about to break it. The phone slipped from Maya's numb fingers as Karen's voice rose to a shriek. The holy water in her hands had begun to boil, steam pouring between her fingers, but she didn't seem to notice the burns forming on her palms. In the name of Jesus Christ, Karen screamed, I cast out all demons from this place. I claim this ground for the kingdom of heaven. She held the remaining holy water at the central stone. The explosion of light was visible 3 counties away. When Maya's vision cleared, Karen stood in the center of the circle, her body rigid, eyes rolled back to show only whites. The stones around her hummed with an energy that made Maya's teeth ache. And from somewhere deep underground came an answering call, ancient, patient, and hungry. Karen's mouth opened, but the voice that emerged wasn't hers. Finally. Do you know how long I've been waiting for someone foolish enough to break the seals? Maya ran for the house, but she could already feel something rising from beneath the stones, something her grandmother had spent decades keeping buried. Karen's righteous crusade had just unleashed exactly what the meditation circle had been designed to contain. Behind her, Karen's laughter echoed across the neighborhood, but it was layered now with harmonics no human throat could produce. The blessed ground she tried to create had become something else entirely, a doorway that should never have been opened. Maya's hand shook as she fumbled with the deadbolt, the ancient brass key her grandmother had given her finally sliding home. The house itself seemed to exhale as the protection engaged, walls that had stood for over a century settling with relief. Through the kitchen window, she could see Karen still standing in the stone circle, arms raised to the sky, her mouth moving in silent communion with whatever had taken residence behind her eyes. The temperature inside the house was dropping. Maya's breath came out in puffs as she grabbed her phone and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? There's someone on my property who won't leave. Maya paused. watching Karen begin to levitate 3 feet off the ground. She's trespassing, and I think she's having some kind of psychiatric episode. Is the individual threatening you or causing property damage? Maya watched Karen extend her arms, and every piece of holy water and oil she'd scattered began to rise from the ground, forming geometric patterns in the air around the stones. Define property damage. Units are en route. Please stay inside. And the line went dead. Maya looked at her phone. No signal. The Wi-Fi was down too. She was completely cut off. A knock at the front door made her jump. Through the peephole, she saw a small Asian woman in her 70s wearing a hand-knitted sweater and sensible shoes. She looked like someone's grandmother, but her eyes held the weight of decades. Maya, the woman called softly. I'm Eleanor Kim. I was your grandmother's friend. We need to talk. Maya hesitated, then unlocked the door. Eleanor stepped inside, carrying a worn leather satchel that clinked with glass bottles. Your grandmother told you the stones were for meditation, Eleanor said without preamble. She was protecting you. Children shouldn't know about such things. But you're not a child anymore, and that full woman has forced our hand. What are those stones really? Eleanor set her satchel on the kitchen table and began removing items, bundles of herbs, small mirrors, vials of various liquids, binding stones. Your grandmother and I placed them in 1987 after the last incident. There's something under this land, Maya. Something old and patient and very, very angry. Through the window, they could see Karen had begun to glow with her. Same phosphorescent light as the stones. Her feet weren't touching the ground anymore. What kind of something? The kind that feeds on righteous fury and religious fervor. It's been sleeping for decades, contained by the balance your grandmother maintained. But that woman's ritual, her absolute certainty in her own righteousness, it's exactly what the entity needed to break free. Maya's stomach clenched. So, Karen's possessed. Worse, she's willing. Her mind is so convinced she's doing God's work that she's opened herself completely. The entity doesn't need to fight her. She's invited it in. Eleanor handed Maya a small silver pendant. Wear this. It won't stop what's coming, but it might keep you from being influenced. A sound like thunder rolled across the property, but the sky was clear. In the backyard, the stone circle was spinning, all 7 stones rotating around the central pillar in perfect synchronization. Karen hung suspended in the center, her body rigid, her mouth open in a scream they couldn't hear. Through the glass. We have to help her, Maya said. We have to survive her, Eleanor corrected. Look at your neighbors. Maya looked out the front windows. Across the street, porch lights were coming on. People were emerging from their houses, but they weren't walking normally. They moved in perfect unison, their faces blank, all turning toward Maya's property with mechanical precision. It's spreading, Eleanor murmured. Faster than last time. Last time. 1987. The Morrison family lived here then. Built a prayer labyrinth in their backyard without understanding what they were awakening. By the time we contained it, half the neighborhood had been affected. We had to. Eleanor stopped. We had to make difficult choices. More neighbors were appearing. Maya recognized Mrs. Patterson from 3 houses down, walking barefoot across the frost-covered grass. Behind her came the Thompson family, Mom, Dad, and their twin 10-year-olds, all moving with the same eerie synchronization. They are coming. Here, Maya whispered. The entity needs them. It's been contained for so long that it's weak. But human belief is like spiritual food. The more devoted the believers, the stronger it becomes. And your neighbor just provided it with the perfect host. A gentle knock at the front door made them both freeze. Maya looked through the peephole. Mrs. Patterson stood on the porch, her usual friendly smile in place, but her eyes were completely black. Maya, dear, came the familiar voice, though it carried strange harmonics. We'd like to talk to you about your salvation. May we come in? Eleanor grabbed Maya's arm. Don't answer. Don't engage. The moment you acknowledge it, you give it permission to influence you. The knocking continued, patient and polite. Through the back window, Maya could see more neighbors, gathering around the stone circle. They formed concentric rings around Karen, who had begun to spin in place like a grotesque music box ballerina. Maya, Mrs. Patterson called again. I know you're in there. We are not here to hurt you. We want to help you understand what your grandmother was hiding from you. Despite Eleanor's warning, Maya found herself stepping toward the door. The voice was so reasonable, so kind. Mrs. Patterson had always been nice to her, bringing cookies when she'd first moved in. Eleanor slapped her, hard. The sharp pain cleared Maya's head instantly. It's already starting, Eleanor said. The entity feeds on certainty, on absolute belief. It makes people feel righteous, justified, completely sure they're doing the right thing. That's how it hooks them. Through the back window, they watched as Karen slowly descended to stand once again in the center of the stone circle. But she wasn't alone anymore. Translucent figures surrounded her, shapes that might once have been human but were now stretched and distorted into something else entirely. The previous hosts, Eleanor explained. Everyone who's ever been consumed by this thing over the centuries. They're all still in there, convinced they're serving a higher purpose. Karen raised her arms, and the ghostly figures raised theirs in unison. The neighbors around the circle did the same. When Karen spoke, her voice carried across the entire property with supernatural clarity. Maya Chen, she called, her tone warm and inviting. Your grandmother was a good woman, but she was deceived by false teachings. Come out, and let us show you the truth. Let us baptize you properly in the name of the one true faith. Maya felt the pull again, a deep, almost gravitational force urging her toward the door. The idea of walking out there, of joining the peaceful gathering, seemed suddenly appealing. They all looked so serene, so unified in purpose. Eleanor pressed another pendant into Maya's hand, this one warm to the touch. Hold this. Think about your grandmother. Remember why she really brought you here as a child. Memories flooded back, not the sanitized version Maya had carried into adulthood, but the real ones. Her grandmother teaching her to feel the energy around the stones, warning her about people who were too certain, too convinced of their own righteousness. The way the old woman would sometimes stand guard at the windows during certain storms, muttering protective chants until dawn. She knew this would happen eventually, Maya realized. She hoped it wouldn't happen in your lifetime. But she prepared for it anyway. Eleanor opened her satchel wider, revealing items Maya now recognized. The same herbs her grandmother had burned during those long nights, the same mirrors she'd placed at specific points around the house. Outside, the circle of neighbors had begun to chant. Not in Latin or any recognizable language, but in something that seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to the hindbrain. Maya felt her resolve wavering again. Then she heard sirens in the distance. The police, Maya said with relief. Eleanor's expression was grim. That's not necessarily good news. How many officers do you think are regular churchgoers in this town? The sirens grew closer, then stopped. Through the front window, Maya could see 2 police cruisers pulling up to the curb. 4 officers got out, moving with the same eerily synchronized movements as the neighbors. Officer Bradley, the one Karen had mentioned as attending her church, walked up to the front door. His knock was polite but insistent. Maya Chen. This is Officer Bradley. We've had reports of a disturbance. We need you to come outside so we can sort this out. Eleanor was already moving, hanging mirrors at precise angles near the windows, sprinkling salt across the thresholds. Your grandmother built this house to be defensible, she murmured. But defenses only work if you understand what you're defending against. Officer Bradley called again. I'm going to need you to open this door. We have a warrant to check on your welfare. They can't have a warrant, Maya whispered. It's been 20 minutes. They don't need a real warrant, Eleanor replied. They just need to believe they have one. That's how this thing works. It makes people absolutely certain their actions are justified, no matter how extreme. Through the back window, Maya watched Karen spread her arms wide. The other neighbors mirrored the gesture perfectly. When Karen began to speak, everyone else's lips moved in unison, creating a chorus that shook the windows. O righteous God! They chanted, cleanse this place of false idols. Purify this ground with holy fire. Let no heathen teaching take root where your truth should flow. The house groaned as waves of supernatural pressure washed over it. Maya felt her grandmother's protection straining. The mirrors Eleanor had placed began to crack, and the salt lines at the threshold started to smoke and blacken. How long will the house hold? Maya asked, watching plaster dust rain from the ceiling. Eleanor was frantically sorting through her remaining supplies. Against what it was 30 minutes ago. Indefinitely. Against what it is now. She gestured toward. The windows where Karen's transformed figure blazed like a fallen angel. Maybe 10 minutes. Outside, the possessed neighbors had formed a perfect circle around the house. They stood motionless, hands clasped, lips moving in silent prayer. But Maya could see the wrongness in their posture, backs too straight, feet too precisely positioned, heads tilted at identical angles. There has to be something we can do, Maya said. Some way to reverse this. There is. Eleanor's voice was heavy with resignation. The same thing we did in 1987. Complete destruction. Burn everything. The stones, the house, anyone who's been touched by the entity. Salt the earth and pray it's enough. Maya stared at her. You're talking about murdering half the neighborhood. I'm talking about saving the other half. And everyone beyond that. Eleanor met her gaze steadily. This thing doesn't stop at property lines, Maya. It spreads like a virus, jumping from believer to believer. The Morrison incident was contained to 37 people because we acted quickly. If we don't, a sound like grinding stone interrupted her. Through the shattered windows, they watched the broken stones begin to move. The 7 pillars were rearranging themselves, sliding across the ground to form a new pattern. Not a circle this time, but a star. Oh no, Eleanor whispered. It's preparing for the final binding. Final binding. Not to contain the entity. To bind everyone within its reach to its will permanently. Right now, the possession is temporary. Break the entity's concentration. And people can be freed. But if it completes this ritual. Eleanor shook her head. Everyone becomes a permanent extension of its consciousness. A hive mind of absolute believers. Karen stood at the center of the forming star, her burning eyes fixed on the house. When she spoke, her voice carried impossible distances, reaching into every corner of the neighborhood. Children of faith, she called, the time of purification has come. Join me in Holy Communion. Let us become one body, one spirit, one perfect instrument of divine will. More figures emerged from the surrounding houses. Maya watched in horror as entire families walked out their front doors, parents carrying sleeping infants, elderly couples helping each other down porch steps, teenagers leaving their homework half-finished on kitchen tables, all moving with that same mechanical precision toward the star formation. How many people live in this neighborhood? Eleanor asked grimly. Maya tried to count the approaching figures. Maybe 200, 250. Too many. We can't stop them all, and even if we could. Eleanor's voice trailed off as she watched a young mother place her toddler in the outer ring of the star pattern. Some lines shouldn't be crossed. A new sound cut through the night, the deep tolling of church bells. But there was no church within miles, and the sound seemed to come from underground, reverberating through the earth itself. It's calling them, Eleanor said. Every believer within 10 miles will feel that summons. They'll come willingly, convinced. They're answering a holy call. The temperature in the house dropped another 10 degrees. Maya's breath came out in thick clouds as she watched more people streaming across her property. She recognized faces from the grocery store, the coffee shop, the bank. Regular people she'd smiled at and exchanged pleasantries with, now walking toward their spiritual enslavement with expressions of serene joy. There has to be another way, Maya insisted. My grandmother wouldn't have just planned for mass murder. She was a healer. Eleanor paused in her inventory, looking up sharply. What did you just say? I said she was a healer. She helped people. She wouldn't. No, before that. You said she wouldn't have just planned for mass murder. Eleanor's eyes lit up with sudden hope. Maya, you're right. Your grandmother was always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. If she spent 37 years draining that thing's power. Eleanor rushed to the photograph she'd shown Maya earlier, the one of her grandmother standing next to the obsidian stones. She held it up to the window, comparing it to the current formation outside. Look at the pattern, she said urgently. In the photo, your grandmother is standing at the 7th point, but there are only 7 stones, and they are arranged in a circle. Maya looked closer. I don't understand. The 8th point. Your grandmother was the 8th point. She wasn't just maintaining the binding, she was part of it. And if the pattern needs an 8th point to function properly, understanding dawned. With horrifying clarity. You want me to go out there. Not as a victim. As the missing piece. Eleanor grabbed Maya's hands. Your grandmother didn't just teach you meditation techniques. She was preparing you. Training you to take her place. If this day ever came. Outside, Karen's voice rose in a chant that made the remaining windows vibrate. The star formation was almost complete, with possessed neighbors standing at each point and filling the spaces between. At the center, Karen's transformed figure blazed brighter, her hair now pure white flame. I can't, Maya said. I don't know. How? I'm not trained for this. Your grandmother spent every summer teaching you to feel the energy around the stones. She had you practice breathing exercises that were actually power channeling techniques. She made you memorize poems that were binding incantations. Eleanor's grip tightened. You know more than you realize. The house shuddered as another wave of pressure hit it. The front door began to splinter, and Maya could hear Officer Bradley's voice, still polite but with an edge of something inhuman. We really need you to come out now. The whole neighborhood is worried about you. Maya closed her eyes, trying to remember her grandmother's lessons. The old woman had always insisted on perfect pronunciation for her poems, had made Maya repeat the words until they felt natural on her tongue. At the time, it had seemed like harmless cultural preservation. Now, even if I remember everything perfectly, Maya said, how do I get out there without being converted like everyone else? Eleanor smiled grimly and pulled a final item from her satchel, a small vial of silvery liquid that seemed to move on its own. Your grandmother's blood, mixed with mercury and blessed under 7 different moons. 1 drop on your tongue, and you'll be immune to the entity's influence for exactly 13 minutes. 13 minutes to save the world. 13 minutes to either bind it again or die trying. Eleanor met her gaze. I won't lie to you, the odds aren't good. Your grandmother was stronger than you, more experienced, and she barely managed it the first time. But you have one advantage she didn't. Which is, you're angry. Really, truly furious at what that self-righteous woman has done to your home, your neighbors, your life. The entity feeds on religious fervor, but binding magic feeds on righteous anger. And right now, you're the most righteously angry person, in a 10-mile radius. Maya looked out at the scene in her backyard. Karen stood in the center of the star, arms raised toward the sky, surrounded by dozens of people who'd been robbed of their free will. Children who should be sleeping safely in their beds. Parents who should be tucking them in. An entire community, twisted into instruments of an ancient evil's will. The anger that rose in Maya's chest was indeed righteous, clean and pure and absolutely furious. Tell me what to do, she said. Eleanor uncorked the vial. The liquid inside pulsed with its own light, and Maya could swear she heard her grandmother's voice whispering in a language older than English. Drink this. Wait 30 seconds for it to take effect. Then walk out there and take your place at the 8th point, directly opposite Karen. The binding words will come to you when you need them, but you have to mean them completely. No doubt, no hesitation. Maya took the vial, surprised by how warm it felt. And if I fail? Then the entity completes its ritual, binds everyone within 50 miles to its will, and uses them to spread even further. By next week, it could have half the state. By next month. Eleanor shrugged. Well, let's just say your grandmother's worst-case scenarios were very creative. Outside, Karen's chant reached a crescendo. The star formation began to glow, lines of light connecting each point. At the center, something was rising from the ground, a pillar of darkness that hurt to look at directly. It's starting, Eleanor said urgently. If you're going to do this, it has to be now. Maya lifted the vial to her lips. The liquid tasted like starlight and old copper, burning her tongue before sliding down her throat like liquid fire. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the world exploded into clarity. She could see the entity now, not the beautiful, righteous figure Karen appeared to be, but the writhing mass of hunger and hatred beneath. She could see the golden threads connecting it to each possessed person, feeding on their devotion. And she could see the weakness in the pattern, the missing 8th point that would complete either the binding or the final enslavement. I understand. Maya whispered, and she did. Every lesson her grandmother had taught her, every poem and breathing exercise and moment of meditation by the stones, it all clicked into place like,